Hey, it's John from the Commander's Brew. Baldur's Gate, Commander Legends 2. It's a lot of new commanders, a lot of new cards. Let's check out the set review. That's too many cards. Okay, I'm going to go over some of the legendaries. I'll talk about the background, some of the normal cards, and I think I'm going to share a cool new idea that fixes the initiative deal. It's fine, but I think it could be a lot more fun. Stay tuned. Over 800 cards, and it's a draft set that's meant to be played as a game of Commander, so you know there's going to be a high density of legendaries anyway. I'm going to try and record all of them, but I will edit this down so you won't hear me talk about all of them. The video would be too long that way. But let's get started with some of the multicolored ones. And first up, the 3 colors. I think Dynahair Invoker Adept is pretty neat. It's a Jeskai commander. I think giving all of your other creatures haste to use abilities right away is good. This reminds me of 1,000-Year Elixir, which, you know, it goes up and down in price, but it's like pushing $5. So I'm always happy to get another effect like that. I can't imagine finding another ability that costs 4 or more that I really would want to copy. I tried doing some digging, and Dragonkin Berserker seems kind of neat, but that one actually does get cheaper the more dragons you have, so you actually aren't able to double it after the first activation. I don't know. Mirkul, Lord of Bones. This is an interesting Obzon commander. A few of them have this life less than half your starting total to get indestructible, which is fine. I'll take that every time. And here's another way to get a little bit of a wrath protection for your creatures. All the non-tokens come back as little enchantment token versions. They're not in the graveyard. They're exiled, so you don't really want to do too much Reanimator this way. It's kind of like free Reanimator, but it's a 7-drop. I think Miriam Sentinel Worm is interesting. Clearly a dragon tribal commander because you're going to get extra dragons, 2 of them. And I like that game, Double Dragon. Mazzy True Sword Paladin. Mazzy's a great name. I mean, it turns every enchantment you have into Rancor plus whatever the enchantment is, because it's given the +2/+0 on trample and it's coming back from the graveyard. So it's like how they tack on draw a card or scry 1 to some cards to make them a little bit better. This tacks on Rancor to all your enchantments to make it a little bit better. Zevlor El Turel Exile. It's always an issue in a multiplayer game when you spend 1 card to remove 1 creature off of an opponent's board, because the other 2 players who aren't involved kind of go up on that exchange. I'm down 1, they're down 1 creature, but the other 2 people just get to keep all their resources and creatures. Zevlor kind of gets around that for a 2-mana tax. For an extra 2 mana, now your murders get rid of 1 creature from everybody. And if you're focusing on single target removal, you can probably find stuff that's cheap enough where you'll be able to afford the extra 2. I like this card. Okay, that's all the 3 color commanders. Whew, that was a lot. I feel like I've aged to bring those to you. Does it look like I've aged? Anyway, let's move on to the 2 color commanders. Alonso the Seer is interesting. It's a little bit complicated. So imagine like this. You exile a 6-mana card, basically put it into suspend 6 time counters. Then, as part of the ability, you remove a time counter. Now, during your next turn, you remove another one, because that's what you do during your upkeep. You exile another card, maybe a 4-drop. Now, they each have 4 time counters, and Alonso removes 1 from each. That's what he does. Then on your upkeep, they all go down to 3. You exile something else with time counters, take another one off. Those first 2 are down to 2. And then next turn, they'll be at 1. And if you can activate Alonso again, they'll be at 0. And you'll get them all at the same time if you stack them the right way. 2, and then 2 less, and then 2 less. Whew. It's complicated, but interesting. Commander Liara Portier. I like that she has the name Commander in it. It's like she's saying, this format only. I think it's an interesting way to give Boros some card advantage. I'm definitely going to want to attack every player at once, but I think Commander Liara Portier really shines in an Ishin deck, because now you're getting double those triggers. You're exiling 6 cards and you're getting them 6 cheaper. If you do some sort of artifact build, you'll be able to cast most of those artifacts for free. Nero Wild Mage sounds really interesting to me because I like Possibility Storm, and I acknowledge that a lot of other people do not like Possibility Storm. So here's a way where you can just have a little bit of a taste of Possibility Storm yourself. The tough thing is you got to have a ton of scry in here, because you're going to want to have huge things and tiny things. The tiny things trigger the huge things. So you're going to want to be able to scry or put things on top of the library that are huge so that you ensure you get them. The potential to cheat out huge things is pretty strong. So I think this is a cute commander, but it might actually be really powerful. Nalia Diarnis. This is the party commander we've been waiting for, in my opinion. We already get card advantage by playing things off the top of our deck, and specifically if they're party members, and getting a +1/+1 encounter on every creature we control and giving them death touch is a very nice bonus for having a full party. Since Nalia is a rogue, I think I would probably aim to focus on the other 3 classes so that, I mean, you don't get the bonus if Nalia is not out, so I don't need other rogues. I need wizards, rogues, and clerics. Throw in a bunch of changelings, and I think I have good odds of getting a full party. Minthara, Merciless Soul. I am happy that they want to give us more experience counter commanders because, you know, the more of them we have, the more likely we are to be able to find combinations that do cool things. Since Minthara watches for when permanents leave the battlefield, that's a natural pairing with Marin of Clan Neltoth. Now, Marin doesn't really need a ton of help getting experience counters because there's no restriction on how many you can get in a turn, but the two of them together work quite nicely. Keep printing those experience counter commanders, wizards. Raphael, Fiendish Savior, is definitely a cool but rude dude. I think it's nice that we get sort of a lord that gives +1/+1 to a bunch of different things that are in the same category. This gets around my pet peeve of how the wizard category system is a little bit too specifically divided. But this is a nice way to combine all those kind of like devilish things. I like Astarion the Decadent. There is lots of potential for life loss if you run this commander, but more importantly, this is the perfect card now if we want to do Mozart Tribal. Okay, had to take another break there, and I do feel like I've aged even more talking about all these cards, but a few more 2-color commanders, and then I'm on to the monocolor commanders. Whew. I'm highlighting Cadria Collar of the Small because a lot of times with these effects, when we make tokens, they're tied to a specific number like your power or how much damage you've done, but this being tied to how many tokens we already have means we can potentially get a ton of tokens all at once. It's not easy to get more than 10 at a time, but with Cadria, it's actually possible. Pretty easy to give her unblockable with various types of equipment, and the irony is not lost that your rabbits are also tokens and they double every time you hit, which is kind of the thing about rabbits, they say. They multiply very quickly. Just ask Australia. I think John Arenicus Shattered One is very interesting in that how they handled goad. Well, first of all, it's interesting that they have a goad card in blue, not a color that really gets a ton of goad. Kind of want red in there. Nonetheless, the specific line, "this creature can't be sacrificed," is key for this. Whenever you hand things over to opponents, they're always going to sacrifice them, and that sucks. It's not the kind of fun I want to have. But John Arenicus says you can't do that. And because it goes away tapped, if you put it on a player that is not next, they don't have it as a blocker, as a way to kind of pseudo sacrifice it that way. So very cool design. They achieved what I believe they were going for. That doesn't always happen. The Council of Four is an interesting thing. It is just a card that keeps an eye on value engines. And it is a little bit of a shame that there isn't anything that watches for extra lands coming in. That would make it 100% perfect. Well, that has been a long time talking about those cards. I did edit a lot of them out, but I don't actually know how long I recorded, but I seem to have been recording a long time. Long enough for me to have evolved into a stone. Yeah, this is going to be tricky to continue. You know what? Okay, I'm going to pause this. I'm going to come back. I'm going to figure out a way to turn myself back into a regular person and then get back with the set review. Okay, stay tuned. Okay, that worked. I had to make a couple of sketchy deals with some weird fairies, so I hope that doesn't come back to bite me, but I think I got my normal appearance back. And rather than talk about that fantastic adventure I went on, let's talk about some backgrounds on monocolor commanders. So all of the monocolored legendaries have choose a background on there, and all of the backgrounds are enchantments that affect a commander. Your commander creatures have blah, blah, blah. So the idea is that you can put one of these monocolored legendaries in any background you want to get 2 different colors. You could put 2 of the same color in your command zone, but I think you're losing out by not getting more spells that way. This is very much a style of design where cards that are one color kind of do a thing that that color is known for, and there's not a ton of variation for them. We're not going to see anything surprising with these monocolored commanders. So just as an example of what some of the backgrounds do, there's a couple of interesting things in here, but the white ones either make tokens, counters, some sort of combat or politics stuff. The blue ones are things like unblockability, copying other creatures, drawing some cards. The black ones can turn your commander into a form of an aristocrat, or just buffing your creature somehow, turning him to sort of a demon where you have to get to sack other creatures, but now you get flying and extra damage. The red ones, they're pretty broad, but extra combat steps, impulse draw, goading things, making treasures. The green ones, again, stuff we're used to, entering with +1/+1 counters, combat buffs, making squirrel tokens, making your commander a 10/10. And then the commanders themselves that let you choose one. Again, we're kind of dipping into some similar territory with the white creatures, combinations of tokens, flickering +1/+1 counters. There's one that lets you assign damage equal to your toughness. The blue ones, unblockability, casting extra spells from the yard, drawing more cards, giving artifacts flash. The black ones, some sort of recursion, sacrificing to either draw cards or do damage, that sort of thing. The red one are giving you different attack triggers, upgrading creatures into 4/1 menace skeletons. There's a dice one that lets you roll 2 dice and pick one, kind of Krark's dice, if you will. The green ones give us some ramp by getting lands out of the graveyard, attacking with extra power. It does include the greatest bear ever printed. I mean, look at this thing. We've come a long way from a 2-mana 2/2. And the thing you'll notice about all these backgrounds is that they do apply to your commander creatures that you control. So in this draft format, you're going to have one monocolored commander and one background, but the tempting thing will be to put these backgrounds in decks that already use partner commanders, 2 distinct creatures in the command zone, because now these backgrounds affect 2 creatures. The one minor drawback for all decks except dragons, tribal decks, is that some of these backgrounds are specifically about dragons. The blue one does a nice thing where it also gives artifacts flash, so if you don't have a dragon deck, it still does cool things, but a lot of them just kind of make dragons better or help you cast them cheaper, that sort of thing, which again is very cool in a dragon's tribal deck, but it would be tough for other decks to take advantage of them. I kind of feel like if you have limited slots for this brand new type of mechanic, make them a bit more flexible, we want to play with them. And I specifically want to highlight Font of Magic, which isn't a background, but being able to cast your commanders multiple times gets tricky, but not if you have 2 commanders in the command zone. This thing could make your instants and sorceries real cheap. I do want to talk about a few cards that are not commanders that are just pretty interesting. Kicking it off with Archivist of Ogma. I mean, if there's a white card that says draw a card, I gotta talk about it. It's a 2-mana flash 2/2, which is very good, right? And there's a lot of searching in a commander game. If you get this in your opening hand, I think you're going to draw a bunch of cards right away. Descent into Avernus. Sounds like you're saying Descent into a Furnace. It's a pretty cool card that really puts a clock on the game. It's really interesting, and I think it's interesting enough to make a little variant based on it. Ooh, I got some time left for another game, but maybe not a long game. Do you want to play DIA? Oh, that variant where you start with a Descent into Avernus in the middle of the table and it just ticks up every round of the table, providing people with tons more treasures and taking tons more damage. And to counteract the advantage of the first player getting a little bit of a bonus, then it's the 4th player who gets this first, so they get first crack at the treasures. Should be quick. Owlbear Cub is an interesting design idea on how to sort of punish green decks. There's a bit of an irony here because if you are a green deck, you will probably also have 8 lands, so Owlbear Cub also works against you. And now we're in that weird territory where anyone with a clone deck can actually create another Owlbear Cub and use it against you, the original owner of the Owlbear Club. I definitely want to highlight Monster Manual because just that ability for 2 mana putting a creature into the battlefield is very good. You got to pay 4 to get the artifact first, so that's 6 mana. So as long as your first thing is more than a 6-drop, you've kind of paid for it. I mean, you're down a card, but if you could untap with it, this is a very strong effect. Definitely want to highlight the Wand of Wonder and to look at it in comparison with Chaos Wand. Chaos Wand costs 3, and for 4 mana, you target an opponent and get one of their instants or sorceries. Wand of Wonder costs an additional mana to cast, same activation, except if you roll a 1 to 9, it's exactly Chaos Wand, but you get to choose which of those revealed instants or sorceries. Sometimes you hit a counterspell or something you can't use. There's a huge chance you're going to hit something that you actually can use. And there's a bonus of rolling better dice and actually getting a couple of spells off this thing. I'm never going to assume I'm going to roll 20, but rolling 10 or higher seems 50-50. I think it's better than 50-50, right? Because you count the 10 and the 20, right? Speaking of dice, I have to highlight this new Elder Dragon cycle. These are all monstrous dragons with huge casting costs and huge stats, and whenever they hit, you roll a d20 with the potential of a huge bonus. I think we're all drooling over the red one getting us d20 worth of treasures. These are really powerful effects, and I think a ton of decks will want them. Some of them seem too expensive. If your meta is super fast and super powerful, they may never connect. Man, they are splashy. Couple of artifacts to highlight. Patriarch's Seal specifically. 3 mana rocks with upside are becoming pretty common, and they're giving us some pretty neat designs on them. But untapping a legendary creature you control, heck, if you've got a commander that cares about tapping and untapping, this is the mana rock for you. And Navigation Orb, it's 1 mana cheaper than casting a Burnished Heart and cracking it right away. But if you're a deck that likes Burnished Heart, I'm sure you will love Navigation Orb. So the last thing I want to talk about is initiative. It works a lot like Monarch in that once the initiative has appeared in the game, it never goes away. And you take initiative from other people either by cards that say take the initiative or by doing combat damage to them. So far that's exactly like Monarch. But the main difference here is that you don't draw a card at end of turn. When you get initiative, you go farther into the Undercity. Now, the Undercity is a different dungeon. You can't be in 2 dungeons at once, so if you're already in a different dungeon for some reason, taking the initiative will further you through that dungeon, but once you're done there, and then you take another initiative, you have to go to the Undercity. And you'll keep looping it through as long as you keep taking initiative, and the routes are fine. I think it is neat to be able to plan ahead and be like, well, I don't want to take initiative from them because I will get a mediocre ability, and then the next player has the advantage of being able to get the coolest part of initiative. But that's not what D&D's like. You don't know what's going on in a room before you go in there. It's a bit of a mystery. So here's my idea. You make a deck of rooms, and every time you take the initiative, you just flip one over. And instead of asking people to put a bunch of take the initiative cards in the deck, just put it in the middle of the table to start with. First blood gets first initiative, and then we're rolling. You could kind of keep them all low to mid-powered stuff, or you could put a huge range in stuff from Scry 1 to exile the top of everybody's deck and cast all those things without paying their mana costs. Think of it like a plane chase, but different. And I think a cool way to go would be to make something like a little staircase room, whatever you want to call it, and you divide the rooms up into floors. The first floor rooms are just going to be little things. Draw a card, make a treasure, something gets +2/+0 till end of turn. I don't know. But you shuffle in a little staircase there, and if you flip that one, you go to the level 2 rooms. The level 2 rooms are like draw 2 cards, that sort of thing. Maybe create a 4/4 Rhino. These are going to be definitely things you want. And again, if you hit another little staircase card, you go to the level 3. There's no limit to how many levels you want to do, just how many staircases do you want to hit on average. It's up to you. But I think the interesting part of this is you can put some crazy good stuff on deeper levels of the dungeon that you're adventuring into. And now there's a major incentive of doing those attacks because those are huge bonuses. They swing games wildly, so obviously that might not be your cup of tea, but seems like a fun variant to me. Well, there you have it. There's my set review for Baldur's Gate. It took me about 10,000 years to record it. And then when I was a rock, I met a fairy and tricked them into turning me back into me, bringing me back to now. I feel a little bit weird about tricking a fairy, so I think that the Fae community might be after me. So we'll see how that affects future episodes. But in the meantime, I should be working on some brews around these Baldur's Gate commanders, so stay tuned for those. And in the meantime, keep being you. The world's a better place for it. See you next time.